All right, underclassmen, here is our next project. It is called a multi-view object because we're going to choose one view of an object, but look at it from many different sides. So, for example, you need to choose a multifaceted object. That means it has some unique features to it. Maybe you could turn it from different points of view. It has lots of gadgets or things on it. Maybe it's a tall vacuum cleaner. Bikes are great for this. So avoid something simple like a smooth cup. That is not going to show you any unique features or information on an object, especially not enough to shoot multiple images of. And this will kind of become a little bit clearer as we move on. So like I said, you could do something like a vacuum cleaner or say a bike in your garage, motorcycle, something that has multiple parts and things to it that could be easily photographed and kind of create some interesting photos. All right, investigate the one object, okay, and shoot photos of it from a series of different sides, angles, and distances. So like I mentioned before, we want some object that we can shoot in different ways. And what I want you to do is when you go to shoot the picture, here's your camera features here. You normally find on the right-hand side when you go to shoot. Underneath photo is the option to shoot square images. I need you to make sure this setting is on so that every time you shoot an interesting area of the vacuum cleaner, the bike, the motorcycle, whatever you might have access to, that interesting item, it could be a guitar, that interesting item is always going to have a square photo. Okay? How many photos do you need? So glad you asked. Shoot many photos from different views, but what I need to have turned in are maybe your 6 favorite cropped views into Shobi. All right, as we've done before, crop them nice. If you got too much background junk that isn't really helping the design, we still have some folks that are shooting pictures with lots of negative space in the background. At this point in the semester, we need to be looking at the objects, okay? And this project's really going to be focusing on the objects. So less background, almost nil, and mostly on the uniqueness of different parts of this object. What paper are we going to work on? Well, you can work in your sketchbook. If you have colored paper you want to work on, you can do that too. Depending on the paper size that you have, because some people's sketchbooks are one of 2 different sizes typically. You might be 8.5 by 11 inch paper, or you might be 9 by 12 inch paper. Take a ruler, figure it out. It might even say it on the outside of the sketchbook. Most of the time it does. Depending on that, you need to draw on your paper a grid with 6 squares. If you're on 8.5 by 11 paper, the squares are going to be one size. If they're on another, they're going to be another size. So quick visual here. We're looking for 6 squares, and they will probably kind of fit vertically down your paper. Okay, and again, if you're working with 8.5 by 11 inch paper, you're going to measure 3.5 inch squares. That means they're 3.5 inch on all 4 sides. A 9 by 12 piece of paper, if you're a little bit bigger paper, this is sort of easier measuring. They're going to be 4 inch squares. Again, 4 inches all 4 sides. All right, use a ruler lightly to kind of divide those areas on your sketchbook paper. Cool? All right. Inside each of your squares, you're going to be drawing one of those different 6 views of photos that you took and you submitted. All right. So we took 6 photos. We have 6 squares. Well, let's take that back. You may have taken even more photos, but the 6 that you turned in, that you cropped and you decided that you thought were best, all right, those are the 6 you're going to illustrate in these 6 squares that you have drawn on your paper, okay? You can choose your media. Or if you would like to alternate between two different styles of media, say every other one you want to do in, oil pastel or colored pencil or something like that. We'll see here. We'll see what our options are. And so you can alternate kind of how you want to play it, or just use one medium for the entire thing. Totally up to you. Okay. Now, let's look at some of these samples here below. Okay. This is sort of the beginning of the samples. I'll scroll up a little bit here. Note, just a notice to you that these examples, when I've done this before, we've done this with 12 squares, all right? But because of our time frame, we're kind of knocking that in half. We're going to do 6, all right? So you can see that there'll be a lot more squares here than what you're going to be working with. However, looking at the samples below, notice how they use a lot of value. There's very little background. There's a little bit here and a little bit here, right? But the majority of the photos really are capturing the details of that object. And very little of the paper, very little of the white paper, or even the color paper that you might be drawing on, is left. It is remaining for the brightest highlights that you see, and really little else. So the coverage that you will have of these 6 squares will be almost complete. Okay, so your photographs, let's look at this one. This one was an old photo of an old phone that somebody took a picture of, right? All right, so like we have a close-up of the actual dialing mechanism. We have a close-up of the hang-up area, of the old cord, of the handset, of different curves of the cord as it goes over certain areas, a different view of the actual dialing feature, a different placement of the insert of the cord going into the back of it, part of the handset. So even when you're looking at just one object, look how close they got to all of the features on that object, okay? There was enough uniqueness that they zoomed in and they grabbed a lot of details that they could get. And the full values that they're giving are really rich. Okay, keep in mind that we never want to flatten our images by putting hard outlines around everything or every object. All right, if it shows a rich shadow or a hard line, great, but not everything is going to have a hard, rich, solid line. Okay, so here's what these guys look like in full, right? And again, we're just doing and working with 6. Okay, so we have 6 of them. All right, gonna scroll down a little further. Here's a student one from 2016. Clay Monarch eventually went on to take AP Art, but he did this in drawing and painting. And he took one of the skulls that we've had in our classroom, right, forever, hanging around, the bones and stuff. Some of you have drawn an intro to art. So he took one of the skulls and took all kinds of images and points of view of it. He did this in charcoal and charcoal pencils. All right. So a lot of smudging, really rich values where you could feel really deep going into the holes of the sockets of the eyes, the cavernous areas of where some of the bone had broken out. You can see how deep those are. So pushing those values, and really even the whites, you can even see here, aren't completely white. He reserved those, again, for the barely 10% that might have reflective or bright highlights. Okay. Media options. What can you do this in? Well, looky here. You could do in colored pencils. You could do in the oil pastels. You could do graphite pencils. You could do charcoal in the charcoal pencils. Some of you have. All right. The points given for turning in your photos, your 6 cropped photos, it's set into the square mode. Those will be given a separate grade from this overall grade here, okay? So for turning those in on Shobi, they will have their own folder, all right? So make sure that you note that. And then here's some of the rubric and the focus we want to have, okay? We want to see some strength in just recapturing some of those compositions that you took from the photos. How well have you reproduced that square image, right, in this small space of a 4x4 or a 3.5 square on this paper. Strong values, push those values. When you think you haven't pushed them enough, push further, because most of the time you aren't pushing beyond where you need to go to feel the form of your objects. Really observe in the photo where the light areas and where the dark areas are. One thing that I would possibly suggest, if you work in charcoal, like this gentleman here did, I would even suggest taking the photos and turning them into black and whites, because in the camera feature, you can set it to mono or noir, which is black and white, whichever you feel gets, really rich colors of blacks and whites. And sometimes I find it's easier to reproduce a black and white creation with that kind of a media if you start from a black and white photo. Food for thought. Okay. Let's see. Strong observed likeness in each section. So the proportions, here we're talking about the proportions of the objects, how well they are in relationship to each other, a lack of distortions, etc. Okay. How you use perspective. That you follow directions. You complete the artist statement and the photos of the finished work. I'll have a little artist statement with some questions to have you fill out, okay? And to shoot a really clear, nice, close-up view of your final work. Again, it's always helpful if you prop up vertically your work so that it can be shot without a proportionate distortion or a perspective twist, okay? And that way you also don't create your own shadow with the iPad camera as you would when you're hovering over the top of it, okay? Again, if you have any questions, let me know. I'll do my best to kind of break things down for you, okay? You can either see this document by itself in Shobi, or you can listen to this again.